My name's Amelia Broussard, and this piece is called Along, Let's Go, and it's part of a series where I'm exploring my connection to the Cajun culture. Along means, it translates to let's go in Cajun French, and it's one of the phrases that was used regularly in my household. Always like pretty stern and urgent, like let's get out the door, we have somewhere important to go, like church or school. And it was always kind of like this very serious meaning, like along, like it's time. And part of this series is me just exploring what parts of the Cajun language or what parts of that culture are still preserved within my own life, and what is important for me to pass on to future generations. You know, a lot of the words I just know here and there, and it's been a really interesting process to just think about which ones have been preserved or which ones I still know by heart. The first three pieces in the series were called By Mon Chat, and so that's also like a very endearing word, chat. And so, yeah, it's just, I think collage has been a really wonderful medium for me to use to explore this. The actual process of cutting the strips away or cutting the material feels like a metaphor of like what I'm extracting, what I'm preserving, what's important in this. And this piece in particular uses a lot of Louisiana maps in the background. And part of what I was exploring is just simultaneously with the Cajun culture disappearing, also the acres of the Louisiana coast that are disappearing, and just, you know, what's going to be left for future generations in all aspects. And so the maps were taken from different decades, along with some of the other materials were papers from my grandparents' house whenever we cleaned that out. So some of the words on here, you see Lasty Broussard, which was my grandfather, and dictionaries, and then using some imagery from Louisiana, just to drive that home. So, yeah, that's about it. But it's been just an interesting process to see what was important to me.
What's it with the Sprite? Is that Sprite?
It is Sprite. I think the Sprite, I liked the idea of like some of the trash kind of along the coast, like how are we preserving and taking care of the land, and so just like throwing this trash into the mix of like the beautiful magnolia and some of the animals and creatures in there.
Does the circle shape have a meaning?
Yeah, I think I really love using circles just in general, but for me what comes up is like, you know, the imagery of like a thought bubble, or, you know, and so kind of thinking about those memories. And then also growing up in South Louisiana, I was raised Catholic, and so some of the like icons and religious aspect where you always see like the gold halo, there's gold around the side of the circle. So just the idea of like preserving, and kind of what Nick was talking about, like the sacredness of some of these traditions and histories. It's like a nod to that, but I also just like circles. Yeah.
What was your relationship with like land when you were like 10 versus now? And yeah, are there any differences?
Yes, I mean, we were always like shoved outside to just go play and explore. But some of my fondest memories are in the Lacassine Bayou, which my family and like my great-great-grandfather had property there. And it was always just, it felt like a really magical, special place. You know, Spanish moss everywhere, and we would find cocoons, and it was a lot of just exploring and like a lot of independence. So I think that was really pivotal. And I feel that connection whenever I go out into the bayou now, wherever that might be. Yeah, I feel like very at home, barefoot in the mud, you know. I probably should do it more to connect. Yeah.
Is your family still there?
Yes, so most of my family's in Lafayette still, but my grandparents were in Scott, and I don't know if anyone's familiar with Scott, but they lived right next to the church. So most of the house is torn down, but there's still like my grandpa's shed that now the church uses for part of like the rectory and stuff. So when I go to Lafayette, I sneak into the shed still, even though it's owned by the church. But yeah, it just has like that nostalgic smell, and yeah,